The instructions were excellent. Thank you very much. And for those of you here again, welcome. And this is the publication session. So getting your great work published through the Journal of Technology Management and Applied Engineering. So again, I welcome you. I am Gretchen Mosier, the chair of the JTMAE board. We also have the board of directors, that is. We also have Randy Peters from Indiana State, the other ISU. They probably think of us that way too, the other ISU. He is the chief editor of the Journal for Technology Management and Applied Engineering. Welcome to the question and answer session. And I assume that all of you listened to the workshop slide presentation beforehand. It was about a 40-minute presentation. So with that, I will open the floor if you have any questions or comments, or would you like to look at slides again. I'm happy to share them. If not, I'm happy to do a summary. Randy and I can summarize some of the high points, I think, from the slide presentation. Just going to go into my documents here and open them back up. How many of you in this audience have had experience publishing in a peer-reviewed journal? Anybody here? Or are you new publishers? Future publishers, let's just call it that, shall we? There's Randy. Nope, I see I've got some things in the chat. No publishing experience yet. I think, Randy, do you want to make any comments about what a new publisher should know? Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks.
What a new publisher should know, that's, yeah, I think they should probably start out by reviewing how our basic template, if you will, and how things should be aligned. I know a lot of publishers or a lot of people that are trying to publish with different places will start out in a format that's not a format that we accept. So I think that's been a lot of our challenges of late is that they may be, and I suppose that there's this sort of shopping around for who's going to accept my paper first. Yeah, that does happen, but I think that you should probably be aware of all the requirements first. And I think that Gretchen can tell you where to find those now on the website, because that's kind of moved around as it's been redesigned and rethought.
I don't know if I can tell you exactly, but I would say it's good time spent to check the formatting ahead of time before you submit. You take the time to submit and put everything together with this research. You don't want it to be rejected essentially on a technicality. We can't even look at these things until they're in the right format. I mean, that really is an important part of publishing and just like when you apply for grant proposals, every government agency has a different system. Every journal has a different system. And we do that just to make your lives miserable. Not really, but that is just the way of publishing, right? Everybody's got their own system that they do, and your job as the author is to learn it and to follow it. And that can be challenging, but I would argue it is time well spent to make yourself familiar with that. So got a few new people joining. Do I have other questions, comments? I know I've got a couple of other people on that have some experience with journals from the more administrative end with Kevin Howell and David Holloway. Both have some experience. If either of you have had a chance to review our slides from the JTMAE, could you speak to maybe differences between how we handle papers and how you all handle papers? That would be helpful, perhaps, while we think about questions.
With the Journal of Technology Studies, you know, your colleague Dr. Schwab serves as our editor, and we've gone through, you know, like most journals, we've gone through a lot of transition, you know, with his leadership over the last maybe, I guess, 5 years has been a large transition. And I think the biggest thing for us is the way that when an article is finally approved, it goes live right away, and you don't have to wait for the for the whole edition to be ready. And I know that our readers and members appreciate having access to that information, you know, up front and right away. They don't have to hang around. You know, it's frustrating when you've got an article that you know is accepted, but it's not in print for 6 months.
Right, that is frustrating. Although you can say it's in press, so that, you know, on the Vita.
That's true.
But yeah, if you want people to actually read it, it is sometimes difficult. I agree. I think that timeline between acceptance and publishing has shortened dramatically, even in the last 5 years since I've been on the journal board. I think that definitely makes it easier, particularly with a smaller journal like the Journal of Technology Studies or the Journal of Technology Management and Applied Engineering. So I have a few people new, welcome, and we are getting your great research published, scholarly publishing with the Journal of Technology Management and Applied Engineering. So these new times make us do all sorts of funny things. So 2 years ago, Randy and I had this great presentation scheduled and nobody showed up to it because they scheduled us on top of a variety of different other things. They didn't schedule us. There was just too much stuff and not enough time. So we're glad to have an audience today, and we're glad to see the interest in publishing in the journal. So does anybody have any pressing questions? I'll continue to ask about how the journal works, or if you're interested in reviewing, we're happy to talk to you about that as well. You guys are a quiet group this morning, I must say.
I have a question.
By all means.
Are there published guidelines for the journal that we can access on the website?
I believe so. And Karen said she was just going to step away for a few minutes. Let me see if I can find them, and I will share it with you on the website. There's been quite a bit of moving around on the website recently, but I know those things are somewhere on the website. It's just a matter of where. So let me see if I can try to find them for you. And most anything related to the journal is under the publications tab on the front page of the ATMAE site. And from there, I would click on learn how to get published. So I'll share see if I can share my screen here.
Are the slides you're referring to also there on the same location?
The slides I am referring to, actually, I will share those first. The slides that I am referring to are what I prepared for this presentation. So I will share those right now. Let's see. I'm going to move these over and want you to confirm that you are seeing a slide that says scholarly publishing with the Journal of Technology Management and Applied Engineering. Is that true? Okay, good. I never know for sure. So, all right, let me just let a couple more people in here. And so here are the slides, and they are, if you log into the ATMAE website and go to, I believe, sessions, they should be published there. The slides themselves with the presentation with me narrating it. I am happy to send you a copy of these slides if you'd like to see them. But I'll just give you a quick rundown of what was in those slides. So we do have, and I'm going to put this into presentation mode so it's easier to see. We do have a fair number of submissions each year. We have kind of a skeleton staff that handles, and some of us are unpaid, i.e. Randy and I, we have our real jobs and then we have this job, right? But Randy is actually the one that handles a lot of the incoming, along with Karen, who is our primary administrator for the journal. And we have, I would say, a fair amount of citations that occur, but part of this has been just a challenge in getting the articles out so that people can see them. And so they come up when you do, for example, a Google Scholar search. And actually the board of directors is for JTMAE, we are working on a solution that is going to change over in 2022 that will give us a little bit more, I don't know if I want to use the word access, but it will certainly elevate the articles so that they are easier to find when someone types in a search into Google or Google Scholar or any of the other search engines. And we think this will improve the citation rates. These citations were drawn simply from Google Scholar, and they are all of the citations, for example, for 2010, 166. Not surprisingly, not a huge number for 2020, even though we do have 8 published articles already out for 2020. So we feel good about the impact that a JTMAE article and manuscript has. And of course, the reason you should publish in JTMAE is because you're trying to reach the audience that you intend to, not necessarily because it's going to give you a higher or lower level of prestige than something else. I'm going to talk, because I have a set of new writers, it seems like, new publishers. I'm going to talk a little bit about reviewing, and then I'm going to also talk about handling reviews, unless folks have questions that I have not addressed. So Joseph, you asked about the slides and where they were at. They are under the sessions link for the ATMAE conference site, and that is the presentation in its entirety. And if you so desire, I'm happy to send you those slides if you'd like. But here are some best practices on reviewing. I think as a reviewer, it's not uncommon for you to have a review that you don't completely understand the topic on. That is not only common, it's almost, I would say without exception, there's always going to be parts of the research that you don't understand or that you're not familiar with. That's okay. It's still okay for you to review. In fact, sometimes that makes you a better reviewer because you can call out things that authors often use, jargon, acronyms, things like that, that often need to be spelled out for people who are not familiar with the topic that you're discussing. So feeling unqualified to do a review is not that unusual, but I would also urge you to think about how harsh you are on the writer and the authors. New reviewers are often overly harsh. And they're very particular, and I don't know whether that's because they've just come out of a graduate program or they've come from an industrial background or what, but often they are overly harsh. Comments or questions?
Well, I would say that on the harshness of the reviews, I think that sometimes, you get submissions that are, not good, and the harshness is well deserved.
Yes, I would agree with that too.
Not for the JOTS journal, but I know that the worst submission that I've ever read, I spent 3 weeks correcting this, and it was horrific. It was a dumpster fire of an article, and you get the comments from the other reviewer, and the comments from the other reviewer was, "This was so bad, I quit after the first paragraph."
Yes, no, I don't disagree with you at all.
And I was positive, and so I added a lot of, I basically rewrote this article with my comments, and the other reviewer says, "This is the worst thing I've ever said."
So I think that's a good transition into the next slide point that
Sure.
says give constructive criticism, right? Your job is, certainly we feel like saying sometimes as the editorial staff to say, this is a, I can't remember the term you used, about a dumpster, but
Dumpster fire.
dumpster fire. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly articles like that, but I am a big believer that sometimes authors are so married to these things, they don't always know that. They can't see that. They don't want to see it. Help them improve the manuscript rather than just saying, this is awful. But I would agree. I've had articles that I've read where I've spent an hour or more just on the abstract. And that's when you have to really wonder, is it worth it? And so your job, I think, as the authors is to make it so that it is worth it for us to continue to give you feedback. So let's see.
I see my job out there, Gretchen, as the first point of this is that I vet them in the beginning to see if they're going to be at least worthy of review. They might be dumpster fires, but they're little bitty ones when they go out from me. I tend to well, I will say that I've had to do some significant suggestions and editing of some papers, but that's, I guess that comes along with it too. So there's yeah, I just wanted to say that I try not to get our reviewers something that's completely off the wall, but every once in a while that does even slip through.
Yep, I would agree. I also would say that as a journal, I think we balance both the needs of the authors as well as the needs of the reviewers. We have to control the quality coming in, because if we give reviewers articles and manuscripts that aren't review ready, if that makes sense, they won't review for us again, right? They'll say, I'm not going to waste my time doing this. So it's important to have things ready for review, and that means in the right format, written so things can be understood, and following the correct parts to, the components that we ask for. So I'm going to move ahead in terms of, I'm going to just speak a little bit about this topic, because this is one that I think we run into a lot, particularly after a conference where people have proceedings papers that that they think might be good papers, and that is a good assumption. Completed proceedings papers are an excellent basis for a journal manuscript. They are not a journal manuscript in and of themselves. They generally need, and our rule follows the rule of other journals that fall in the same category. So for example, I think we took the general rule of thumb from the Journal of Engineering Technology, which is an American Society of Engineering Education journal. And we said 30% of the material needs to be new. They framed it, ASWE framed it as 70% of the material can be the same. We just flipped it a little bit. But what's that 30% look like? Well, it could mean a more in-depth literature review, more research questions, additional research questions that you are investigating, more or different data analysis, maybe a little bit more in-depth discussion of the results, and sometimes that means additional references. My advice, and maybe Randy could follow on this, is not to put all your chips into your proceedings paper. Save some of your data back. If you have a large project that you've been working on, don't publish every last bit of your data in your proceedings paper. Save some of it that if you wanted to, it would still, and you could still retain the right to publish on that topic. Yes. Is there a question?
Sorry, I was talking to a colleague. I forgot to mute. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. As long as you're not yelling at me, I guess that's fine with me. And I would also give the journal manuscript a different title. I think on your CV, it would be a red flag for me if I saw the same thing, same article, same title listed several times. I think, and it's not just a cosmetic thing. The title should reflect a different approach that you've taken from the proceedings paper. I am not telling you to stop writing proceedings papers. I think they are great scaffolding, particularly for new authors and graduate students, to have some experience with the peer review process, but not, as they move up the chain to get to the top of the ladder, which is the journal manuscript. So that would be my recommendation. I'm going to move forward here. I've got several slides, so I'm going to try and move through them fast and get to the end, the review and revision. So
Gretchen, just so you know, you're going to have to unshare and then share again too.
okay, is it? Did something happen with the slides?
We're seeing your PowerPoint and not the presentation side.
Oh, okay. I will. Let me try this again. Okay, so it says one person can share at a time. I get that. All righty.
So I think the problem was you shared the PowerPoint, like the editing side, and not the presentation side.
Okay. Let's see here. How's it look now?
There you go.
Perfect. All righty. Thank you for that feedback. I appreciate it. So I'd just like to add another couple of pieces of information on the review process that is unique to JTMAE. And that is that review process is a double-blind process. So the editorial panel knows who the authors are, but the reviewers do not. And so they're not going to make judgments on your article based on who you are, because they don't know who you are, right? And oftentimes reviewers are like, or authors are like, I know this person, they're out to get me, right? No, they're not, because they don't know who you are in this case. And our editorial panel makes decisions based on the aims and scope of the journal. I would also say it is not a process that is, at least with the JTMAE, one that is the same every time. For example, if one reviewer says, this is a great article, except as is, another one says major revisions are required, and the third says reject, we probably won't reject, but we're probably not going to accept either, right? I mean, it doesn't all, it's not like an omelet, right? We don't just mix everything together and it comes out as a decision. We look at what the reviewers say, and we consider their comments, and then we make the recommendation to the administrator, who then will communicate that to the author. So we don't have the direct conversation with the author. That goes through the administrator. And we make those decisions based on what we believe are the needs of the journal and the needs of the eventual readers for the journal. So we don't give, and this goes back to some of that kind of in-press discussion that Kevin was talking about earlier. We don't give conditional acceptance. We accept the paper when the paper meets the guidelines of the journal and has addressed all of the things that we've asked the author to address. Generally, when we ask you to make a few minor edits, we'll probably accept it if you do what was asked. But if you argue with us about those few more minor edits, you're going to lower your likelihood that you might be published. I mean, we're not going to publish or punish you for bad behavior, but as an author, generally authors are not in a position to make demands. And we try on the editorial panel to be as author focused as we can be, but we also must respect the opinions that come from the reviewers. And so it is not unusual to go through at least one round of revision, sometimes two, and sometimes even 3 rounds before all of the edits are made and it is cleared for publication. And then, and only then, will you get the letter from the administrator that says, congratulations, we're happy to tell you that we have accepted your paper for publication. And because the Journal of Technology Management Applied Engineering does not have necessarily an issue, we can probably put it up on the site almost as soon as we can get it processed. And that usually is in a week or sometimes even less, week or 2 usually. So the fact that your paper has a second round of edits is not that unusual. The first paper that I had that went through the journal, I think I went through 2 rounds of revision. And it's not, sometimes we try to discourage reviewers from thinking up new things in the second round of revision. But we can't always control that. So I'm looking at the chat. Let's see. Couple of people leaving, and someone has said on slide 4, during the 2020 number of articles, 2015, so let me see. Okay, Randy's answering that. We have published 8 articles in 2020, but we still have more to publish, and that's why that is not available in terms of how many are submitted. We still have more that we expect to submit. So it looks like Randy answered that in the chat. So what slows your review process? Well, a lot of things, but mostly some things are in your control as an author. For example, incorrect formatting, not making changes requested by the editorial panel or the reviewers. Some things are not within your control. For example, the difficulty in finding reviewers who are willing to review your paper. It is kind of indirectly in your control, as Kevin implied earlier. You know, you want a good paper so people are willing to read it. But sometimes, particularly if you're publishing in an area that does not have a lot of expertise among our members, we can struggle to find a willing reviewer. And for this reason, we really welcome anyone who has reviewing or publishing experience into our reviewer fold. The more reviewers we have, the quicker these processes go. So I would say, you know, you want to control as many things as you can as an author to speed up your process. Other questions? I've had several people join us, so just want to make sure that we.
Good morning, everyone. This is Mahmoud from Bemidji State. I do have a question about the timeline for publishing an article. I am a reviewer. I did help reviewing some of the JTMAE papers.
Thank you.
And I try to get this done by the deadline, which is I appreciate that there's a deadline and timeline, but I never tried to publish in this journal, and I do have some concern, which is the long of the period to get published, in which is, you know, we're working on a fast-paced environment, so everybody's need to publish at least 2 or 3 in a year, and if one journal will take me like 3 or 4 months, this is not acceptable. So this is my first question is the timeline. If you could, you know, make it clear for the authors on how long will take, that would maybe encourage more people to submit their articles. The other part of my question is, I believe maybe other authors and researchers could agree with me on this. Now, peer reviewed is not enough. We're looking into journals that indexed by Scopus or SCI and other, journal to indicate the quality, the track, the impact in the field. So is there any future plans that we maybe going into that direction where contact Scopus and make this journal indexed by Scopus, which will, increase the number of people who's interested in publishing in JTMAE journal? Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. I will try to address a couple of them, and maybe Randy can help me on a couple more. First, I believe we are indexed with Randy, help me out here. I should know this, and I didn't look it up ahead of time. We are indexed. Say again.
EBESCO.
EBESCO, yeah. So we do have some indexing. I believe, I'm not sure if you were on the call initially or the session. We are exploring some ways through digital repositories and things for hosting that would give you immediate feedback and monthly updates on who's citing your article, how many citations, how many downloads, that type of thing. That we expect to be in place by the start of 2022. We're working with the board of directors for ATMAE on that. I would also say that the timeline is generally, most articles, if things go smoothly and we can find reviewers, I think we could definitely get inside of that 3 months that you speak of. I don't see it getting a lot quicker than that with the current system that we have in place. Again, it is about balancing the needs of the reviewers versus the needs of the authors. We are not prepared to ask authors or reviewers to turn things around in a week or less. We're not going to do that because we feel like that really impacts negatively the reviews that the papers get when you ask people to turn reviews around in a week. And in fact, I generally reject review requests that ask me to do that because I don't think it's realistic. 3 weeks is about the minimum amount of time that I will accept a review for. I know we work in a fast-paced environment and I'm very aware of that, but I also, the journals that I work with across other parts of my study in this field and others have said the same thing, that 3 months really should be the top of the limit if everything goes well. And I don't expect that it would go much longer than that if the reviewers get their reviews in on time, which we greatly appreciate, but they have a month. So that is a month of time. So if they string it out to the very end, we're at 6 weeks, assuming 2 weeks for vetting, doesn't usually take that long, another month for review. And then authors have between 60 and 90 days to get those back. So that's the piece that the authors have a lot of control over. If they get those right back to us, we will send them back to review if necessary, or we'll make a decision and it'll be published. So it could be as little as 6 to 8 weeks to have it published. If it is a strong article coming in and it needs minor revisions or even major revisions that are handled promptly, can be handled quickly. As Kevin says, I think it's always easier to handle review and revisions when they're well done, right? So when you respond to reviews and get back on, we've done this or we haven't, and here's why, and here's the basis for the review request, and here's why, we made this change because the reviewers asked us to, or whatever, address the changes in the cover letter that goes back to the editorial panel. Did I answer all of your questions? I think I addressed most of them.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much. And the only recommendation I want to see something in the future is to consider indexing the journal in SCABA's services.
I think that is definitely always on the table in terms of we balance costs and a variety of other things, but I appreciate that suggestion. Thank you. Other questions? I'm just going to move forward here to the last section of this presentation because it is talking specifically about responding to reviewers, and particularly with new authors, these are the types of things that really bog them down, you could say. And I feel like I speak with experience. This morning at 6:30, I also received reviews on an article that my graduate student and I submitted, and I wouldn't say they ripped it to shreds, but they certainly gave us a lot of really constructive criticism. And it's not fun to get that criticism. It is difficult. So I would recommend the first thing you do as an author is to let the reviewer's comments maybe sit for 24 hours before you even think about addressing them. Don't let them raise your blood pressure and just relax first. We have had this happen to us before where we have had authors complain to the editorial panel. Generally, you can assume that when we send you reviewers' comments, we have looked at them. And sometimes we do get some that are a little bit bonkers. And if we get those, we'll say, maybe you don't need to worry about what reviewer once said on this particular topic. But more often than not, we'll say, oh, that's a good point, right? They made a good point. I think the authors need to address that. So I think these are all things that are part of the peer review process, I think, for new publishers or new authors. And the fourth point down, when it says when a reviewer doesn't see something, this is my own experience and that I bring to this particular point. Often a reviewer will say, I don't see, you didn't do this, where are the data for these? I didn't see your analysis, I don't understand it. And the writer will write back, the author will write back and say, well, look, it's in paragraph 7 on page 4, line 7. What the reviewer is asking is not necessarily that they don't see it, it's that they didn't pick it up. It wasn't clear to them. So often, rather than arguing with the reviewer and saying, yes, it is so in there, consider rewriting the section to make it clearer what you were saying there. And then you don't have to argue with the reviewer. You could say, this section was rewritten to emphasize the ideas, you know, that were missed by the reviewer the first time, or that the reviewer didn't see the first time. Hopefully the reader could see them more clearly with this revision. It is a little more gracious. It is also, I believe, addresses the root cause of the issue, which is that the concept was not clearly written. Arguing with reviewers is certainly a personal choice, but not something that we would recommend. You're always free to withdraw the article if you take fundamental issue with it. However, as I said earlier, and as an author, you're not really in position to make demands. So if you don't wish to take the advice of the reviewers, you need to explain your reasoning why clearly and objectively. And I would add graciously and say, I'm not going to do this, and this is why. We had a different approach. We didn't communicate it clearly. We have fixed this, or we've addressed this so that it is clear what we were doing. Questions or comments?
I think that's a great point about, you know, if you are going to withdraw an article, you know, be gracious. Don't burn any bridges with the editor. I published an article last year in a journal that I had previously withdrawn from another journal. The journal I had originally submitted to, it was a case study, and they had changed editors, and the new editor said, I will not publish any case studies that are written in the first person. I'm 100% against it, and I won't do it. And the article, the case study I'd written was written in the first person, and that was key to what I was trying to do. And you know, I wrote a very cordial letter back to the editor and withdrew that and submitted it somewhere else and had it published somewhere else. And so I think that's the right methodology to go with.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the communication that goes back and forth between the author, the reviewers, and the editorial panel is an important part of this process. And yeah, the graciousness will carry you a long way, I think.
You can attract a lot more flies with honey than you can with vinegar.
Indeed, very true. Other comments? Just want to check our time here. This is another page. We often get into some pretty heavy discussion when we present these two slides face to face. And I would agree, sometimes the reviews do not seem very fair, particularly when you're very close to this article. You've spent your lifeblood writing this darn thing. And then how dare they say these awful things about it, right? It can be very hurtful, and sometimes it just seems like the odds are stacked against you. Additionally, reviewers do often contradict each other. Sometimes one reviewer will say, this is a great article, well written, well articulated, and the other reviewer says, the writing on this is awful. You know, so it really is a matter of balancing the contradictions and trying to fish out the constructive criticism that comes from the reviewers. I would not recommend, and this is a specific to JTMAE, we don't like to see the whole big modified section in the cover letter. Put that correction on the manuscript and then explain in the cover letter what you did and where it's at on the manuscript. So that's where you maybe go back and say, I rewrote this section to make these points more clear and to better describe the implications of the research. It is on page 15, you know, paragraph 2, lines 7 through 11. On the other hand, and this goes to the other side of the spectrum, when you get your reviews, it is appropriate to thank the reviewers and the editorial panel for their feedback. It is not appropriate to say, you guys are the best editorial panel ever, you know, and really slather on the praise. It's not going to do you any good, unfortunately. And we have had authors that have tried to do that with us, where they've said, oh, you guys are great. You know, raved on it. Don't even it's not worth the time to construct those paragraphs. Thank us, you can be grateful. And actually that is the job of both the editorial panel and the reviewers, is to improve the manuscript, not to make you feel bad or to hurt your feelings, or to make us feel better, like this is our job. No, it is to really improve the manuscript. And ultimately, I think as an author, you can be appreciative of that, and in your letter, write that professionally and follow the directions. We'll tell you specifically what we'd like you to do to improve the document, to improve the manuscript. And we expect you to do it. So, Kevin talked a little bit about first versus third person. I am fairly indifferent about whether you write in the first or third person. My big thing is I want you to be consistent as a reader. Going back and forth is confusing and difficult to read. I would also say, remember that not everyone is as close to this information as you are. So if in doubt, explain it. If in doubt, write out the acronym and explain what it means. Don't assume that readers know. And ultimately, what we care about in this journal is your article, your research, your applied research, your pedagogical research, or your perspectives and their contribution to the ATMAE profession, as well as the disciplines of technology in general. That's really what we're looking for. And we'd like to see that, that strong finish on the article to say, here's what we believe this article is adding to the body of literature. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides and ask for any other questions. I've been trying to modify.
Yeah, I think our session was over about 12 minutes ago.
Oh, was it? I thought it was an hour.
No, it was a half hour.
I'm so sorry, folks. I thought it was an hour. My bad. I am apologizing. Yeah. So I guess we're done.
The breakout.
Thanks for all of you that's stayed on.
Thanks, Gretchen. I love your background. You've got a great building up there.
Thank you. Doesn't look like this today, but And Kevin, I was going to ask you if you knew that Dr. Schwab is no longer my colleague. He has retired.
I did, and I'm excited for him and his segue.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
That's
we've not seen much of him at all, and in fact, one of the things we're dealing with in his departure is EPT business. So trying to kind of reconstruct all the stuff that he's been maintaining.
And that's something I'm trying to do with all of our chapters, is build in some succession planning. And how do you have a good co-trustee that's ready to step up and be trustee when the trustee leaves. And I had a good co-trustee at App State, and he retired. And so now if I get hit by a bus this afternoon, I don't know what happens to the EPT chapter at App State. And so, I've got to do my work locally, but, I see that. So every chapter needs to have the same mentality of, what's next, because EPT's been around. We're getting ready to start 92 years, and it's going to be around for a lot longer. But, all the chapters need to be prepared. I know that we would have 20 chapters active today that aren't active if we had done that planning 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So that's one of my jobs for the next year.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea. There's a lot of things that Dr. Schwab left us, but there are a lot of things that we're still kind of trying to figure out as well. And even with the best succession
and y'all got a great chapter there. And I'm trying to think who all is listed as co-trustees.
So Steve Freeman is one of our co-trustees, and then someone you've probably never met is Tom Brum. He is more on the ag side of the.
I think that I met Tom at the induction ceremony when I was on your campus.
Okay.
So
probably.
Now that sounds good, but I know it's in good hands.
Good. Yes, I would agree. And those hands are not necessarily mine, but. It's nice to see you, Kevin.
It's good seeing you. I look forward to coming back up to Ames maybe next year.
Perfect. We'd love to see you.
Yep, sounds good. Well, I'm
Thank
going
you.
to another session, so it's good to see everybody. Randy, take care.
See ya.
Randy, do you have anything further to add?
No, I think you did a very wonderful job, and I do thank you for. I've watched the conference video, the presentation, and downloaded the slides and all of that. So I mean, that was really excellent. You did a nice job.
Thanks. I apparently recorded it the first time and didn't have my headphones on. And then the second time I recorded it on mute. So that was the third take.
Oh my goodness.
Grouchity grouch. But yeah,
Yeah, I would say
you know, I've been doing this all semester. I know what I'm doing. It's not like I'm a total dork, but anyway, yeah, got it done.
so hey, it only jumped out to bite you a couple of times. So
Oh gosh, yeah. And it's not a 10-minute presentation, right? It's a 40-minute presentation. So I don't get those 80 minutes back, but oh well.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm pleased with the turnout. I feel like
Well, that was excellent. Yes.
Yeah.
I had no
So-
idea.
although
Encouraging.
I didn't count everybody, so hopefully they got a good count for us. But I'm going to stop the recording.